Hello, everyone, and today we are talking about relationships and finances. 1 in 2 Americans are financially strained, putting their dreams out of reach. But Rebecca and Dylan are financial coaches who specifically specialize in helping couples get their finances in order so you can quit the job you hate, take a gap year and travel, prep your finances to start your dream business, and most importantly, enjoy happier and healthier relationships. Rebecca and Dylan are also a couple, business partners, and podcast hosts. They are the RAD Coaches. Welcome. We are so delighted to have you on the show.
Thanks for having us, Tim. In unison.
Yeah, we're a couple too, right?
In unison, perfectly aligned. It's great to have you here. I'm really excited for this one. Finances is something that has to come up eventually in every relationship. And I think all of us can probably remember the moment in which you sort of have to reveal your financial situation to your partner. Like, all relationships have to go through that moment where all the cards are laid out on the table and it's like, hey, this is how rich I am. This is how poor I am.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why we're so excited to be chatting with you and just be on this journey of helping couples navigate that, because it is scary. And, you know, we know I think it's very commonly known, we're not taught about finances. And so I think a lot of millennials in particular are, hey, why didn't we learn this stuff in school? So we know we didn't learn that, but we definitely didn't learn how to deal with it in our marriages. And so it's like a double taboo almost. So yeah, excited to talk to you today about this.
Definitely.
You're right.
Oh, sorry, Tim, but I was thinking too, and you said like laying it out on the table. It is so nerve-wracking when you have that first conversation, and it's not always easy. There's a term in the finance industry where we talk about how much money we have, our net worth, and like that term net worth, it's almost like your value as a human being can be wrapped up in that term. And so, when we're talking about richer or poor, especially when we're not fully like to the point where we'd like to be yet, that's always really nerve-wracking. So how do we have that conversation in a way that's easy and productive? And that's what we're excited about here.
How do you have that conversation? When do you have that conversation? What are the next steps after you've had that conversation? These are all the things that I'm really excited to talk to you about. So let's dive in. What is the big conversations that you need to have as your relationship gets more serious? I know in our prep call, we spoke really about like killing the taboo. I'd love for you guys to talk more about that.
Yeah, it really just starts with that first big step of starting the conversation and being brave enough to say, hey, let's just talk about money more, because there is such a taboo around it, and we're taught that it's very impolite to talk about money, and so we're just really not practiced at it, like I was saying. And so it's really just a matter of being brave enough to start the conversation and get the dialogue going. But even within that, it's how do you start the conversation? How do you come to that conversation is really important. And making sure that you're coming to it in the right mindset and, free from judgment and just open and in a space where you can share and not feel like you're just going to be maybe shamed or guilted or things like that.
Right, and I see honesty being a huge factor here, because the sooner that you can have at least an open conversation about it, not necessarily displaying, like sharing where you are with debt or your credit score, but just having the conversation is so important in the beginning of the relationship, because dates cost money, right? Like, we want to make sure that we're not like presenting ourselves in a way that might be bad for our own financial security, or like putting off a style that isn't even actually our true selves. We want to be our true self when we're meeting somebody and potentially meeting the person that we're going to marry. We want to show the right foot, but also show them the true self at the same time. So money plays in that dating world so much there. So it's so important to just start having the honest conversation from the beginning.
Yeah, and to just kind of piggyback on that just a little bit more is like, it's amazing how quickly we start to communicate our financial situation to the person that we're dating. I mean, it starts on the first time you meet. We're taking in cues. What car do you drive? How do you dress? What restaurants are you going to? All that sort of stuff, right? So it's amazing how fast that's already being communicated to the person that you're with, even if you're not talking about it, right? So it's really worth just going ahead and having the conversation and being honest.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so linked around status and wanting to impress someone. It's really complicated, all of the factors it is wrapped up in, especially when you're at the beginning of a relationship, when you're just first starting to date someone. But what's sort of sad is that really what you're showing is your ability to spend money and your values around what you're spending money, because you might be driving a wonderful car. You might be going to great restaurants. You might be wearing designer clothes, and you might be absolutely broke.
Yes, yes, and it can be an opportunity to be really honest or extremely dishonest, and kind of put on a facade that now all of a sudden you get down the line and it's time to have the money conversation, right? And it kind of surprises or maybe takes your partner off guard when it's like, oh yeah, no, that's all on debt. I'm swimming in credit card debt or, whatever. And so that can be very jarring and can honestly, I think, hurt when there's that switch and it's like feels like dishonesty, right? That challenges the trust in the relationship. So I think people don't really think about that. That sort of switcheroo can be very damaging.
How should couples have this first conversation, and what are some of your top tips for when you lay it all out and you get the net worth out on the table?
Yeah. So the first thing that we actually talked about recently in one of our episodes is, not just first couple dates, laying it out there and just, grilling somebody. Nobody wants that. So take your time with it a little bit and get to know the person a little bit more before really digging into it. You have to be tactful and while still not waiting too long. So that you kind of need to let that be up to you a little bit. But we've heard that there are definitely some trends of people, first couple dates, and they're asking about credit scores and things like that. And it's just like, okay, no, don't do that. That's not going to work. So you need to have the conversation soon, but not too soon. But it doesn't have to also start with like a grilling. It's not an interview. So asking, I think there's just more tactful ways to approach the conversation and questions that you can ask that are less about the money and more about the person you're trying to get to know.
Right. And I see it as like the conversation leads, a productive conversation would be leading in the direction of where do you want to go with life. You can learn a lot about someone's financial mindset and what they do with their money as to like what kind of lifestyle they're looking to create in the future. Whether they see themselves buying a home versus buying a multifamily unit versus, building a business. You learn a lot about someone and where they're going to go with their finances and what risks or no risks maybe they're not willing to take any risks at all is what I was trying to say there. And so you learn a lot by finding out, do you have common alignment in the future of what you're planning for yourself?
Yeah. So, and I think even in Couply, because we love the app, that we use it, we tell people about it, and we think it's just such a great pairing with what we do. So yeah, just love what you're doing, Tim. But there are financial packs in there and questions, and I really enjoyed that they focus on a lot of the values. And so really a great place to start is getting to just know that person and what are their personal goals and what do they value. What does money really mean to them? I think are some questions that I've seen on the app. And I think those are a really good place to start, where it's not someone feeling like they have to just totally expose everything numbers wise, but they can just talk about their belief systems and what's most important to them. And that's a great way to kind of dip your toe into figuring out what their money mindset is.
I'm someone that I really love to be proudly frugal. Right? I love to be frugal. I get a rush of being proudly frugal, but I also like to enjoy nice things. And this is the way that I phrase it, and I think I phrase this to you. I would rather make my own lunch every single day. This is when I was working in an office job. Bring my lunch to work every single day, and then once every 2 weeks, go to a really nice restaurant. You'd end up spending less, but you're having an experience. My partner, luckily, we have the same values around money and frugality, which has really, really helped us in the long term. And in a previous relationship, we did not share the same money values, and that was really, really difficult to manage. What are your guys' money values, and how did you get on the same page?
Oh gosh, we are so opposite. It's pretty funny actually. And I think that's what it really helps out. So I'm definitely the frugal. I could save money all day long until like my shoes, for example. I'll wait until they blow out before buying a new pair of shoes. And Rebecca can tell me months beforehand that I need a new pair of shoes and I should buy a new pair of shoes. So it's good to have someone like Rebecca in my life because I'm so frugal. And she's like, hey, you should take care of yourself today. You should go buy that new pair of shoes. And so I will.
But it's interesting. It's like in ways we're very complementary, like kind of like what he's saying. So I think I will be more able to spend, but I'm similar to you, Tim, in that like I also kind of get a rush off of like getting a really good deal, but I really strive for value. So I will spend heavily on things that like I won't have to replace them for a really long time, because that's kind of my values. My values are having something that's quality and using my money wisely. But it needs to also kind of be a good deal, right? So I'm a value shopper still too. Yeah, but it's been interesting to see how, especially through this journey of being financial coaches together, how we've identified the differences in our money mindsets, and it's just like it just kind of keeps coming up of like, right. Oh yeah, okay, and we're looking at it at a very interesting lens, I think, than other people probably do.
Yeah, a good example is like I'm a little bit more conservative with investing. Rebecca
I'm a risk taker.
She likes the risk.
Nice.
Yeah, we balance each other out for sure.
Very cool. And what are some of the really big misalignments that you commonly see with your couple clients?
Oh, that's such a good question. Really where people end up getting stuck a lot is it has to do with the difference in values, but it's the ability to like decide on what their priorities are really going to be as a couple, and with specifically their financial energy. Because we have different money mindsets and maybe different values and things that skew the lenses that we're both viewing things through. That's where folks really get stuck a lot. So what I mean by that is, one person is rip roaring ready to go on investments, and they're like, okay, financial independence, let's go. And then the other person is like, hey, but I'm still seeing that we have debt and we don't have the emergency fund that I need, and all that stuff to feel good enough to take those risks. And so that's a really common misalignment that we see a lot.
Yeah, I would echo that, and I think if you take a step back, it's where couples have differences is where they've grown up with money, like what they've seen their families do with money, and what they've learned through the process of like getting a job and how they've spent money in the past, and maybe how their job dictates their life a little bit, and all those pieces kind of play into, I have a different background than Rebecca, and so we're melding those two together, and so those differences start to you have to align them at that point when you come together as a couple and figure that out. But we have these two separate ways of doing things, and that's where there can be a lot of misalignment, or that's the source of the misalignment, I would say. Most
of our coupley audience are in long-term serious relationships and or married, with half of them have kids. So really, most of our audience, the stakes are high, but money might be a repetitive problem. It is for many couples.
Yeah.
For these guys, they're ready to take serious steps. What's the process, team? How can they start taking steps to get aligned and get on the same page? What would you recommend for these serious relationships?
Yeah, so the first step is that communication and learning how to do that tactfully. And a big piece of that is the working towards understanding, like Dylan was saying, working to understand your own money story and your partner's. And so that you can start to appreciate where they're coming from and maybe why their beliefs are their beliefs and why their priorities are their priorities. And it's really going to look different for everybody. Even if somebody walked the exact same life that I have, they might still choose to do things very differently. Like, for instance, if with how my parents like managed money, I decided that I wanted to do things the complete opposite, right? Whereas somebody else might just repeat the pattern. You know, and so everybody's going to kind of do things differently, and so it's really just important to kind of see and understand how your partner has lived their life and how the choices that they made because of that.
Yeah, and I think this goes with almost every aspect of the relationship, but when you start to understand your spouse and partner's needs and you start to cater towards those needs, then you receive that back as well financially. So if I need the security, then Rebecca fulfilling my security makes me more open to taking more risks in our investments. And so by playing those things out,
we both win.
Yeah, we both win, exactly. And it's like I said, it plays out. I find this happens in every aspect of the relationship. The more I pour into Rebecca, the more she pours back into me. Instead of me trying to do everything myself, it's the same thing with the money.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Can we bring this down one level into some more concrete examples that couples can do? Because I think with like the example that you've given, Dylan, that makes me think of Dylan is like, I need that emergency fund. Let's get our 3-month emergency fund topped up. We know exactly if we both lost our jobs, how much we'd need for 3 months to keep us going. And then after I've got that pot filled, then we can start to put it into some of Rebecca's more degenerate investment ideas, or more risky pot.
I'm just kidding.
But I'd love to like bring it down a level into that sort of practical thing that couples can do.
Yeah. What would you say to start with?
Well, I do think you have to start with the foundation. You know, you're always going to have to start with a foundational level when it comes to your finances. And so making sure, like you said, taking care of that emergency fund is one of the most basic things that you can do to relieve a lot of stress.
But even before that, though, I'll interject, is to even get to that, you have to start budgeting together. So this is a huge thing that I think people overlook a lot, and they try to divide and conquer, and they think of it like just like household chores. And it just is not the place to do that. Even though there's one of you that's maybe more financially interested or inclined, you both really need to be at that table and make financial decisions together. And it might seem monotonous, it might seem just like, you know, whatever, but you have to work through that as a couple, and get really good at budgeting together so that you can actually align your financial goals and with your actions. Because if you're not doing that together, the right hand isn't going to know what the left hand is doing. And so even if you decide like, okay, we want this emergency fund, well, if you're not both on board with the plan of how you're going to get it, then it's not ever going to happen. And then you're going to just create this really big space for bitterness and resentment and the blame game of like, well, you didn't do this part of the budget. It's like, well, you didn't tell me I had to. And so it's just, it creates this really big opportunity for another fight. And so it starts with that super basic thing of budgeting together, both of you at the table, having those discussions.
Yeah, and I've really seen couples come together in this where there's been so much misunderstanding with finances, and they think it's all about the big picture things like paying down the debt, getting the emergency fund, investing more, but it's literally talking about the day-to-day life with money. It's like when you take care of those small things and you start to figure out, oh, well, I'm spending a little bit more on groceries because the grocery bill keeps inflation, and then the bill keeps going up. And then there's understanding from the other person in the relationship going, oh, well, that really makes sense. But when people aren't talking about these things, there can be so many little places for people to be upset, and it's just because we aren't talking about it and understanding the other person.
Yeah, especially for the parents, that's really critical because there's always going to be one parent who's a little bit more in tune to the kids' needs and knows what's going on, you know, whether it's the after-school sports or the equipment or the, you know, school supplies, whatever's going on. There's always going to be one parent who's just a little bit more in tune to that. And so if you're not both looking at the budget together, then those are going to be expenses that could have been planned for, but now they're surprises. And so now we're being reactive to our financial situation as opposed to proactive. Mm-hmm. So we could just go on all day for why like that is a non-negotiable. divide and conquer the financial chores. Like, they have to be done together.
And for me and my partner, this is not like, it's not a particularly sexy evening. We sit down next to each other, we get the laptops out, we're on a shared spreadsheet on Google Sheets, and we're putting a whole bunch of data in there, and then we're sort of tracking our expenses, we're tracking what's going up, we're tracking what big expenses we think we have that might come up, and then we're tracking things that we're trying to save up for together, and we both like contribute into some shared pots that pay for some things like vacations and this kind of stuff. And it's not a fun, like, we're not messing around, we're not joking, we're like doing it as work that we're doing side by side. But afterwards you feel like this really warm sense of connection, just that everything's out there, because I'm someone that will always put things off, especially if I'm like worried about it, but it's in the calendar, we try and stick to it, and that has helped us get aligned. But each couple, each person needs to find the system that works for you.
Yes, exactly. And then just from our experience, it only works though when you're both doing it. That's the only thing that's non-negotiable. but the other things, what tool do you use? You know, if it's a spreadsheet, is it an app, is it whatever, that sort of stuff, you can figure that out. So you're absolutely right. It looks unique to each couple. But I think that leads kind of to the next thing, is just like, whenever you're having these conversations, something really tactical that I think that people need to remember is to always focus on the finances as an objective thing, and to be very like solution oriented. So to not focus so much on what's going wrong, but just what can you do to make it better, and as a team, because that's really going to be that thing that kind of builds that feeling, like you're saying, of, you know, this term I'm kind of working with right now is, you know, financial intimacy, of, you know, you working towards these goals together and feeling just it's all of this building trust and whatnot. But you have to make sure that you're focusing on the finances as this outside thing that you're both just trying to accomplish as a team, as opposed to just focusing on what's going wrong. So even if, like, yeah, you overspent in eating out that month or whatever, okay, that's just an opportunity for you to be better next month. It's not an opportunity to yell at your partner.
Yeah, it's definitely not. It won't get you anywhere when you start blaming the other person and pointing the finger. Yeah. It's just going to slow the process of any success down with your finances.
Honestly, what a great, important point that you've just made. Financial intimacy. That is the goal, to get on the same page, be side by side with your partner, facing your objectives together. It's not easy. Let's not pretend it is not easy. Most people only talk about finances when things are negative. And that's a quote that I've taken from you. So I'd love you to expand maybe a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that yeah.
Oh no, you
okay.
you had
Yeah, it makes sense, right? We think that when things are going fine, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, you know, so you don't want to talk about it. But I think it's really important to make sure that you're having these check-ins regularly, so that you can celebrate your wins just as much, if not more, because we all have this negative bias, right, to focus on just what's not going well. But we need to be able to talk about money even when things are just going neutral, even when things are just okay. Because I think what really happens is that reminds people and helps that they are okay, and that keeps us out of our fight or flight and helps with our, just like even our stress responses. And so that creates a really healthy environment for when things are going wrong, for it just not to blow up as much, for it not to be such a problem. So learning to talk about money even when things are totally fine, that's just as important, because usually people only talk about it when it's stressing them out, when there's an unexpected emergency or things like that.
Well, and it plays out where when you have the conversations all the time and you have to talk about something bad, it's not going to feel as stressful or as hard, because you're already used to having the conversations. Mm-hmm. And so it's just another conversation. This one just happened to be something that is more challenging and that we have to overcome together.
But if you only talk about it when it's negative, and then your spouse comes to you and they're like, "Hey, we need to talk about the budget," you're like, "Oh God!"
Yeah.
You
I'm
just
gone.
want to run. You're just like, "It's always bad. It's never okay." Like he's just going to try to tell me I can't go to Starbucks anymore, and it's So it's like that's the important part of it is like you have to just make sure that you're talking about it when things are okay, so that that's not always the immediate response that you get when you say, "Hey, it's time to do our budget," and someone just wants to bolt.
Yeah, big time, big time. And it gets good. It can become good as well if you have your financial intimacy. Intimacy leads to your financial structure, leads to perhaps you do begin saving more, and then you start to reach your goals. So what are some of the goals that you see couples set and reach, and how does that improve their lives?
Oh gosh. Everybody's got something unique, but I'd say there's a handful of typical buckets. If we're starting off in our financial journey, a lot of us have student loan debt or something along those lines. So that's always a goal that people are looking to eliminate that debt, because every payment is money that you're not keeping for yourself to do what you want with. So that's one, is just eliminating debt as quickly as possible so that they can have money work for them and be back in their life instead of someone else's life. They're tired of paying for the past. And so that's really cool when people get through that, because that's a hurdle. It isn't necessarily like a mile. It is a milestone in and of itself, but it isn't one that you can like hold on to and like buying your house necessarily. But it is one that gives you so much freedom and relief of stress and anxiety that it's a cool one to see people get through.
Yeah, paying off debt is a really big one. I would say just as frequent as that is buying first homes. So we have definitely helped a lot of folks buy their first homes, buy their first investment properties. That's really exciting. Actually have someone who is an ex Twitter employee who has since just like bought her first investment property and is just like doing her own thing now, and so that's been really cool that we were able to help her create enough of a financial security system where she didn't feel like she was put into crisis, right? And she was able to actually get really creative with her life. And we've seen that with couples and stuff too. So, getting out of debt, buying first homes, quitting toxic jobs.
Yeah, I was going to go into the job aspect as well, because there's almost just a lot of people want to just feel at peace with their money. They don't want to deal with the stress and anxiety of it. And what would happen if the paycheck didn't show up tomorrow? And so getting people to the point where they're like, I don't wake up and think about money. I don't worry about the next paycheck. Like that's actually one of the best rewards as a financial coach, is hearing that people are just like, yeah, money's just good now. Like I'm not worried about it. That's a cool objective for people to reach.
Eliminating that concern, I think it's something that, as someone who has been not good with money and then improved my relationship with money, just that was like something that weighed on me so much all the time. And I remember just constantly having these moments of being like, oh, do I have enough of this? Do I have enough of this? Doing mental math when you're out in a restaurant, being like, can I buy this? Is my card going to get declined? I remember having and feeling those things, which is horrible, absolutely horrible. Just not having that stress and worry, you actually forget how big of a relief that is if you can get yourself into good shape.
Yeah, and it all pours back into the relationship, right? If you're not feeling that constant stress of, can we do the things that we want to do? Can we build the life that we dreamt of building together? When that's no longer this huge thing that seems like a big dream, but it starts to become a little bit more of a reality, and you start to feel that it's possible because you're not stuck in the immediate of, can I afford this thing right now? And you're able to think big picture with each other. I think that's a big part of the financial intimacy thing is now you're just really able to build the life that you probably dreamt about when you first got together. And it is no longer a dream, but it starts to become your reality. And that's just such a cool place to be.
What are some financial relationship green flags and red flags. And let's start with the red flags. What are some of the things that couples should seriously avoid or really think about when it comes to their relationship with finances?
Do you want to take the first one?
Sure. So one red flag is definitely keeping a scorecard and trying to be like managing how your spouse is managing their money. And so by that, it's like, I think I have, what's that reel that I have out that's like, do you really want to fight me?
Oh, yeah.
But it's like when someone's when like you go out and buy some stuff, you know, and you come home and your spouse is just like, why did you buy this? What's, you know, how did you pay for this? And then you just start getting grilled, right? So any of that sort of behavior is a huge red flag.
Well, why don't I just jump to the green flag version of that too? Is so instead what we like to tell people to do is to give each person in the relationship just money to spend freely. That there's the no questions asked fund in the budget that I get to spend, and we set the dollar amount. So let's say it's $150 a month. So I can spend $150 however I want to spend it, and I don't have to check in with Rebecca. If there's something that's over $150, then it's worth a conversation. It doesn't mean I can't get it, but we're just going to talk about it beforehand. And so there's no surprises on my end. And so it's almost a contract and agreement that we set each and every month with each other to say, hey, you're free to spend money up to a certain point, and then at that point, let's just talk about it, because I don't want to say no to you, but let's just see if it works with what we're dealing with this month.
Yeah, because it's not about asking permission, it's just about giving respect.
Yep.
Oh, I love that. Yep. We have this in my relationship. We have like a dollar amount. It's like, hey, you want to spend up to this, whatever, but we always check in with each other before making a big purchase.
Yeah.
And for us, a big purchase is around that, but in Canadian dollars, so it's probably half.
Yeah, and it's gonna look different for everybody,
right.
You know, and like in what season that you're in, right? And how aggressive you're being with your financial goals. So there's so many reasons why that number might be $50. It might be $1,000. Like it's gonna look different for everybody, but it's just a matter of, again, having that conversation and setting that amount that feels good to both of you.
Yeah, yeah. So another red flag would be judging somebody because or not giving anybody the time of day because they have a bunch of student loan debt or they've made some past financial mistakes. It's just kind of taking them at the surface level and saying, oh, well, for me, I'm a good example. I came into our relationship when I proposed to Rebecca. I had over $30,000 worth of student loan debt. Rebecca hardly had any. That scared Rebecca a lot. So, like, she could have just said, hey, I'm done with Dylan at that point. I'm glad she didn't. But that's what people do. We see this on the internet a lot, and there's headlines about it. It's on social media all the time. Oh, this person, had $100,000 worth of student loan debt. I think I'm going to leave him because of that. And we don't see that that's not enough. There needs to be more there. Did you want to?
Yeah. Just reducing somebody down to their financial contributions, pretty much in general. That's a red flag. You know, people are there's so much more than that. And so anytime that vibe is kind of coming off, that's a really big red flag. Kind of like I was saying, asking in the first couple dates, for your numbers and things like that. That's a huge red flag. That's might be where their mindset is. So yeah, just avoid that at all costs. It's terrible.
Yeah, totally agree, and that makes a lot of sense. I think accepting where your partner is at, but hopefully together being able to move forward. Life is a journey. We have to move forward through these goals together. And like the things that we're outlining in this conversation, and for the people listening, you're 33 minutes deep. Most couples don't even talk about their finances for 33 minutes in a structured way outside of like firing snapshots at each other, like you spend too much, or you never save, or you bought this, you bought that. So even if you're here, you've learned so much, and like taking these elements and starting to apply those to your relationship to create that path, even if you're in debt, creating a path together to get out of it is the goal.
Yeah, because that's really what it's all about in our minds, is being able to grow together. One thing that I say to Dylan is, I love the man you are and I love the man you're becoming, because we're both on a journey of becoming new versions and better versions of ourselves all of the time. And so whether it be that somebody's trying to improve their finances or another part of themselves, none of us are perfect. And so we can't zoom in too much on just somebody's, financial mistakes. It's just about the future and the potential to grow and improve together.
And that's the green flag to the other side of that's the other side of that coin. There is like, I had the $30,000 worth of debt, but what was I doing with that? Well, I was managing it. Like, I want to get out of this. I'm not pushing this off. I want to see this thing disappear so that we can live our lives together. And so that's really important, is what's that mindset behind what the person is. If they have financial, I don't want to say
baggage.
I didn't want to say that, but yeah, if you come in with a little bit of financial baggage, it's like, but I'm in the mindset and the process of eliminating that so that we can have a fuller life together. That's really important, versus I'm just going to be the ostrich with my head in the sand and ignore this problem,
or blame the system, or whatever. Pick an excuse, right?
Yeah, pick a bad guy.
Yeah.
And what are some ways that couples can really dig into this financial baggage? Increase income, reduce expenses, but what are some of the tangibles that you guide couples through on that journey?
Yeah. So we talked about budgeting. We kind of touched on setting the priorities together.
That's where, I would say setting priorities is really important. Figuring out what it is that is valuable to you in this particular moment. One mistake that people make in general, whether you're a couple or an individual with your finances, is that you're very well intentioned and you want to do everything at once, but when everything becomes a priority, nothing is actually important. So then by saying, what is it that we really need to take on right now? What is maybe if there's some threats, we need to eliminate threats before we can start to thrive. We need to get past survival so we can start thriving. So dealing with maybe some credit card debt is more important than investing at this time. But saying, I really want to do all of these things, but what's the most important today? If I had to pick one thing, what could I do right now and take one step to making my life a little bit better as a couple? So yeah, prioritization.
Yeah, and that's where a big part of the part of us being financial coaches really comes in, is we can help kind of massage the details of the relationship, but really letting you know, hey, this is the sequence of events. This is really how you build wealth. And it is a matter of, you start with your budget, you start with paying off that expensive debt, you get the emergency fund, you move on, and what are those actual specific steps? And we guide you, through that. But even within that, there's still some priorities that you both just have to get on board with and understand why you're doing those things in that order. And then from there, it's a matter of getting a game plan together as a couple for how you're going to execute that. And a lot of times that comes back to meal prep, actually.
Meal prep?
It all comes back to food. So many couples spend so much on their food.
Oh, yeah.
And
really?
Oh my gosh, hundreds, if not thousands a month. And it's a huge expense. It's one of the things that we just see the most across the board. And so what's really challenging is that when people start to work with us, they're like, okay, so we're going to budget together. These are our priorities. Great. So we can't eat out anymore. And they'll just go from hundreds of dollars and try to totally slash it, which is just not sustainable habit change, right? So what does that mean? That means that as a couple, you have to decide, well, how are we going to feed ourselves? Because we're used to just eating out all the time. So now who's going to take on this household chore? Who's going to actually do the work, the grocery shopping or the meal planning or all this sorts of stuff? So I think that that's an interesting way where the finances, again, circle back to the relationship and how are we actually going to execute this on a daily basis together as a team.
It's really hard, isn't it? Because you're finding this balance where everyone is so busy, no one really wants to cook, no one really wants to wash up, and because you're not spending that much quality time with your partner, perhaps going out to eat becomes your habit or your little ritual together, and because you're stressed, you're busy, you order a few glasses of wine. Why not split a bottle? We can't really order the most cheap bottle of wine on the menu. We have to go like a couple up from the cheapest, and that adds an extra $70. You do that 3 times a week, and before you know it, you are investing 10 or more grand a year in these little rituals. So moving away from that, I suppose, is like a case of like going out once a week, picking a singular date night, or ordering just Uber Eats once a week from a few restaurants that you like, having a bottle of wine at home. Like, these are some things that can probably really dramatically reduce your expenses, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, we even love like the subscription boxes. You know, we get that you're busy. We're busy entrepreneurs ourselves, right? So that's a really great way that you can, especially if you don't know how to cook. A lot of people don't. That's a fun way to also have a shared experience. So you can get the subscription box, you cook it together. Yeah, you buy a bottle of wine for like a fraction of the cost of what you'd pay for it at the restaurant, you know, and you're still getting the quality time and you have the experience together. So it's all a matter of just like finding what works for you as a couple, but it all comes down to those daily habits and behaviors and how do you support each other in doing those, because you just can't say, okay, we're not going to eat out anymore, so then not it, you know. Not cooking, and then, you know. And then it's like you expect but don't communicate that the other person's going to do that for you, right? So it's just like a matter of just massaging this and finding a way that works for everybody.
We've seen people save hundreds of dollars just doing a subscription box too, especially if you eat out on a very regular basis. It's like the easiest, quickest way to like save money on your budget. That's for sure.
What are the other big expenses that people really overspend on in your experience?
Their cars.
Talk to me more about this.
You know, it's just such a status symbol for a lot of people. It has so much wrapped up into it that it does go back to like money stories and just beliefs of worth and demonstrations of wealth. But, you know, the average car payment now in the States is just outrageous. I mean,
I think it's $500.
I think it's over $500 now a month. And that's how much you need to max out your Roth IRA in a year. So it's like really crazy to be driving around a retirement fund to me. And so that can be challenging. And then of course there is interest, they're relatively low interest rate, but we like to focus a lot on cash flow, and cars are eating up couples' cash flow, especially if you have a couple of those notes, right? So again, it's a matter of saying, you know, what are our priorities as a couple? Is it to drive the nicest car on the block, or is it to be actually wealthy? That's up to you, but I can't make that decision for you, but that's a big one.
Yeah, and especially because people turn around cars so often too, they never get the opportunity to live without a car note. And so by keeping your vehicle as long as possible, there's nothing wrong with buying a nice new car. If you're going to take care of it and keep it for a long time, it can treat you well just as well as you treat it. But it's that opportunity to actually get the money back in your pocket at some point in the lifespan of the car. It can make a really big difference in your financial journey. But having no car notes and it means that you have a lot of disposable income that can work for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you've touched on some really interesting points here. My girlfriend and I, we like to sometimes go for a walk around a really fancy neighborhood near us. I'm talking like massive dream mansions, things that look like there's something out of a storybook. And what blows my mind over and over and over again is you have this multi-million dollar house and then super average car. Like house after house after house. These people are not investing in their cars. And I always think like, is it just because this wasn't something that was important to them on their journey, so now it's not something that's important to them? But they never seem to have, a few do, but they never seem to have these really crazy, balling cars that some others do.
Yeah.
It's just something that I see over and over again.
To me, it's pretty obvious. One's an asset and one's a liability. So the real estate is going to keep appreciating and all that, but that car isn't. And so to some people, it's just that simple. And then it is all proportional too to how wealthy somebody is, because a $500 car payment to the average American is too much, but to someone who's uber wealthy, it's nothing. So it's all relative as well. But yeah, I mean, I think it really starts with one's an asset and the other's a liability. So it's a big reason.
Yeah, and there's a lot to do with the fact that, like, I think we just get into the habit of buying things because we're supposed to buy them, right? But we never sit down and think, like, what kind of lifestyle do I really want? And this was actually something, like, when we started to get serious about our finances, Rebecca and I, we got engaged. We realized that we were going to pay for the wedding, so we decided to cut our rent in half, and we moved from a nice house that was near a lake into a smaller apartment, with a neighborhood with, like, really noisy neighbors. But there were some advantages to,
It
like,
was an adventure.
it was great. But that allowed us to pay for our wedding cash and do all the traveling that we wanted to do. So where it might have looked like, oh, Dylan and Rebecca live in this kind of like POS home. Well, but every year we were traveling 2 to 4 weeks out of the year, and we were doing having a lot of adventures and having fun. So I think that's like a question you have to ask yourself in your financial journey, and it's so important with couples, is to say, like, what is it that we really want? Have we just been caught up just doing the things because that's what people do? Yeah. Or is that because that's the lifestyle I want? Because maybe I do want the nice car. That is exactly what makes me happy. I had a client who had a Tesla, and it's a lot of money, but he loves it. And we talked about it a lot because it was like, hey man, if you get rid of the Tesla, life would be a lot easier.
Everything else is gravy.
But he's like, you know what? It's worth the slight headache that it causes. But for someone else, it might not be worth the headache. But we sometimes don't even check in with ourselves and say, is this really valuable and important to me?
You're being modest. We traveled about 6 to 8 weeks a year, but I mean, we really prioritize travel. We're like, we don't need a nice house. We just sleep there. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I used to call all of our anniversary trips like honeymoon 2.0, honeymoon 3.0, because they were just like crazy 2-week vacations.
Yeah, and so we look back and we don't regret, because it is, we made the decisions very consciously. Look back and I don't regret living in a modest house, but I look back at all of those adventures that we got to go on, which are like bucket list adventures. I mean, I'm constantly like, I'm 34. If I died today, had a good run. Like I did good. So it's like just a matter of just like knowing yourself and knowing like what your values are as a couple to set those priorities. But that is the third thing that people spend too much money on, is their housing. And it's hard because rates have gone up so much, but even before they've been climbing as aggressively as they have, I think that a lot of us millennials in particular are trying, we try to compete with our parents when we've had so much working against us already, but also just at really young ages. And I think that we're missing out on a lot of opportunities to really build generational wealth by doing that, and thinking that, in our 20s and 30s, we should have the same house that our parents did that we grew up in, but they didn't have that house in their 20s and 30s, So we're not playing a fair game for ourselves, and we're putting so much money into that, a lot of times renting, that it's kind of sabotaging our financial journey.
I had to move back home really to make a big to kill my debt. When I went through my debt journey, it was living at home, and I was like, needed to accept that I was going to be in my 30s and living at home for a bit, and it was so worth it. It was so worth it. I'm very lucky that I had the stability of family to be able to do that. Not everyone does. I'm very lucky as well that I have very cool parents / roommates who I loved living with. A lot of people don't, but for me that was part of the journey, and the other part was when I did manage to buy a condo, moving in with my girlfriend. It wasn't optional, as my condo burnt down. As some people have heard on this podcast before, part of the genesis of Coupley was that I bought a new condo, furnished it, and the day after I finished furnishing it, which was also my birthday, someone threw a lit cigarette from above, hit my patio furniture. That caught flames. It was 90 degrees in Toronto that week, so everything was like cinderbox dry. That smashed the windows, destroyed my condo, caused over $1 million worth of damage to the building, and I obviously was homeless, but still had condo fees, mortgage, tax, and all of that good stuff. moved in with my girlfriend and was like, this has to work or else I'm homeless. Is there an app that can help couples get on the same page? And when I saw there wasn't, I was like, I should make something because I definitely need it. But once the condo was repaired, I'd been living with my girlfriend for a year at that point. It was only supposed to be 3 months. But once it was repaired, renting out that unit and us living together in a tiny downtown Toronto condo, but saving up together to, like you guys say, try and move our housing journey forward. But even that came with challenges. You know, we speak about our parents, we're millennials, parents are older. For my parents, they were buying the family home at this age. So this is the age where I'm now can start to like remember the house that my parents were buying. And they were really like, you just should spend everything that you can on this house. Like, just go all in on the house. And I was like, Mum and Dad, I'm so sorry. That's not what we want to do. I do not want to be house poor. I just don't want to do it. I want us to buy a more modest house, and I want to be able to continue to save and do other things. I'm not spending every single penny that we have. Then given how the rates have gone up, I'm feeling very thankful for that. It's interesting, the journey.
It is. And like we're saying, you know, just everybody's is so different. And yeah, it's really just cool to hear that you had such strong financial boundaries. I think that's a really important thing to do with anybody in your life. But it can be hard with parents. For us, it was with our wedding, you know, and really just being and just refusing to go into debt for our wedding and refusing to disrupt. It was in the middle of our financial freedom journey. And so we were like, we're not going to dial back on how aggressively we're paying off our debt. We're paying for this cash, and that means an extremely modest wedding. And like, you're lucky we're not eloping. And, you know, just like, be thankful. You know, so but you have to have those boundaries, and you have to be able to kind of unplug yourself from what other people are saying, what society is saying, and just know what your priorities are for the life that you want to create. Is just so important.
Well, and it comes in seasons, right? Like, it's a season where we're going to take care of our debt, and then that season's going to be over, but then, like, think of it as a winter and you're going into spring. It's going to be a lot better after we get through this process together. Or the same thing with, like, living in this modest apartment that you were in, being able to rent out the condo, it helps you generate more cash, and maybe in the future you're going to be buying something nicer, but it's just a season where you're in this particular place. So I think we sometimes get stuck in thinking, oh, this is it forever, but it's just, maybe I'm doing this for a short period of time so that I can set my future self up for even more success later.
Some of the things that you mentioned here are financial freedom, financial independence, and then there's one that I love, which is financial independence, retire early. Could we just quickly talk to the audience about some of these concepts?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So financial freedom, well, I'd jump in and say, I think all over the internet you're going to get different definitions. So yeah, we'll just kind of caveat it at that. But the way I see it is financial freedom is where you are 100% debt free, or at least debt.
Except the mortgage.
Yeah, except for the mortgage, or like if you had rental properties, like, you know, anything that's an asset would be different. But like unproductive debt, like credit cards, student loans, cars, totally debt free there. And you've got a 3 to 6 month emergency fund where you're pretty, you know, the money that you're making is yours and you're sitting comfortably. There's not really stress associated with finances anymore. Would you add anything else to that one?
No, you're debt free and you're no longer living paycheck to paycheck. So the debt free is obviously you're debt free. That was pretty obvious, but the not living paycheck to paycheck, that's that emergency fund. So you can be debt free and still live paycheck to paycheck. So that's an important caveat. So to be financially free, you really need both. Financial independence, so that's where you have enough in investments. It can be in the stock market, real estate, businesses, etc. You have enough consistent revenue coming in to you, usually passively, that you no longer have to work. If you choose not to, you no longer have to actually punch in or, you know, on a consistent basis. So that's kind of financial independence. People think that it's incredibly passive, but I mean, there's still things to be done. You just don't have to show up to a job. But you can live off of the income from those investments in perpetuity, which just means forever. As long as you maintain a certain level of assets in that account. So you can't just like rip it all out and pull it cash. That's not going to work. It's a matter of like living off of either interest or profits from businesses and things like that.
And the idea of that, it would be either really juicing up your sort of dividend investing account, or owning rental properties, or owning a business that pays you out regularly.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. And then the FIRE community.
It's like a subset of financial independence of itself, I would say. It's like its own kind of a pillar inside of that.
Yeah, but the RE, so it's an acronym, right? That's an acronym. Yeah, FIRE, so financially independent, retired early. And so this is essentially just people who want to retire before the traditional retirement age, which continues to get bumped, but 40s, 50s, something like that. So this is a very aggressive movement to really amp up your investments and leave the workforce essentially effectively if you wanted to. Become work optional is kind of the way I like to think about it more so. As soon as possible, at a youngest age of possible. We have our qualms with this community because there's a lot of scarcity and there's it's a lot of
sacrificing of everything.
It's just not worth it to us, but it's a path you can choose should you want to.
We have the first time I heard about the FIRE community was from a member of the company I used to work at. Her name was Sherry. She was a lawyer, absolute legend. Anyway, she retired. I think she was around 42. And she did a presentation on like, here's how I have retired at 42 to everyone in the company, and our collective minds blew. And we were like, well, what are you gonna do? And she's like, well, I'm moving to Portugal for this next year, and I want to learn how to ride horses. And then she's just there, like an image of her, like riding on a horse on the beach and living her dream. And then she's like in Costa Rica for winter, and that is it. She's done for the time being. She said like maybe in 5 or 6 years she'll come back and do a project or something that mildly interests her. But she's out. She is out the game. So that was something that definitely introduced myself to that community, and it's really cool seeing someone who just do it. It's pretty cool. I see it in tech less, because people in tech sometimes sell their businesses. They're technically FIRE, but then they just
roll it into the next thing.
Work just as hard as something else, or they work just as hard in their investing. I see that a lot where they become angel investors, and they're like just as busy and aggressively angel investing. They don't have to work per se, but they are working because work is interesting and fulfilling, which I guess is FIRE actually.
Yeah, that's the work optional part.
Yeah. I think that's the thing too, is I could only imagine working so hard for 5 to 10 years to get to that point, and to totally drop out of a career and stop working, I think would be so foreign. That'd be such an interesting place to be. And I understand how people continue to work after the fact that they've hit that number, because I mean you've trained that part of your mind and your body so much, it'd be depressing to stop. So it's good to have the horses and surfing in Costa Rica, or whatever your friend's doing in Costa Rica to fill our time well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Team, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for your time. Where can people find you? Are you accepting clients? And tell us more about what you've got planned this year.
Yeah, so we're RAD Coaches on Instagram, and our podcast, like you mentioned, is actually called RAD Money. And so please do check us out there. Our program right now, we're accepting applications, so we are working with couples on managing their money together. And it starts with exactly what we talked about today, of really building that foundation of strong communication and learning how to really have these conversations. And then we do dive into the actual financial side of it and helping you understand what you need to do to be financially successful together. And so all that information is available on our website, so you can find that. That's just www.radcoaches.com, or just through our Instagram.
And I'll make sure all of that is available in the show notes below as well. So just please scroll down from here and check out the RAD Coaches. What a pleasure it was. Thank you so much for being on. And finally, what are you up to this year? Any exciting things that you can share with the couply community?
Oh gosh. Well, coaching couples is the thing for us this year. It was a transition at the beginning of the year, realizing, wow, this has really been it, and this is who we really help serving. So I would say that's like the most exciting business thing, is realizing who we really want to help the most. That's really it in terms of business.
And with that has been the podcast.
Yeah.
So we really do love creating that way. That's been the super fun to learn. And so that's our big project for the year, is just being consistent. We have a little, I don't know, check mark thing on our refrigerator.
A goal sheet.
A goal sheet for our first 50 episodes. So that's our
Amazing.
focus.
And as a couple,
Amazing.
it's going to be our 7-year anniversary coming up in October. So that's exciting.
Yeah,
Another 2-week trip, I hope, planned to celebrate that one.
at least.
Yeah.
Rebecca and Dylan, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks
Thanks,
for
Tim.
having us, Tim.